U.S. Law Shield, extremely important. More people carry than ever before. There are more gun owners in the United States than ever before. Self-defense and emergencies can happen to anybody, and there's no guarantee that the justice system is going to be on your side. You want U.S. Law Shield in your corner for the fight after the fight. While you protect your family and you protect yourself, you want U.S. Law Shield there to help defend you 24/7, 365. So if you're a gun owner, if you have a CCW and you carry, get U.S. Law Shield. It's crucial. Hey, welcome to Gun Owners Radio. My name is Michael Schwartz, and we're going to do a segment that we call Gun Owners Radio Magnum. Normally, our radio show is every Sunday from 4 to 6. You can tune in on our YouTube channel or from our website, gunownersradio.com. Or if you're in the San Diego area and parts of Orange County and Riverside, you can listen on 1170 a.m. live every Sunday from 4 to 6. And we do a lot of reviews and interviews and all kinds of cool segments on our radio show. But our Gun Owners Radio Magnum segment allows us to get a little bit more in depth with people and really get to know who they are and what makes them tick. So, welcome. Today's guest is a very good friend of mine. His name's Alex Dovgalevsky. Did I say that right?
Almost. Close, very close.
Alex runs say it so I get it right.
Dovgalevsky.
Okay. Alex runs Guns and Moses. And he is fresh off winning our Liaison of the Year award at our San Diego County Gun Owners Second Amendment Celebration Dinner. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. That was amazing, very unexpected, very humbling.
Well, that's awesome. It was a fun event, though.
Oh, it was great. Can we do that every month?
Yeah. Well, we're doing it again on June 18th. I'm never going to skip a year again. We had to skip because of COVID. This is our first in-person interview since COVID, by the way, for Gun Owners Radio for the Magnum. We were doing it over Zoom, and this is so you're groundbreaking again here. You're
excellent.
Our first in-person interview back after COVID.
Yeah, this is much better. Being at home, it's a lonely feeling even when you're on Zoom.
Yeah.
So this is definitely better. I'm honored to be breaking another ground.
Well, there's a lot I want to talk to you about. I find you to be an extremely interesting person. In fact, I think the best part of my job on Gun Owners Radio and working for San Diego County Gun Owners is I get to meet the most interesting people in the community, and you're definitely one of those people. I mean, you and I have known each other and have been in the same Second Amendment circles for years, for at least 10 years now, going back to the NRA members councils and the Friends of the NRA dinner, right? We used to
That's right.
man booths and see each other at gun shows all the time.
Yes, that was a big part of what eventually ended up helping me, to run Guns and Moses. Is I started volunteering for a lot of organizations, including Second Amendment organizations, Friends of NRA, where I met you, and I met a lot of wonderful people, Second Amendment supporters in San Diego. And so I've learned a lot from individuals and also from groups, how they're run, how to do it. And without it, I wouldn't be able to do anything.
So why was supporting the Second Amendment important to you?
For me personally, it kind of goes back to, I was born in the Soviet Union, and I was 10 years old when I came here, but of course, I have a lot of memories of being in that kind of state, and also a lot of experiences that my parents and grandparents have told me about. I get to witness some of it and hear a lot about it from my family, and it formed a lot of my political opinions and just a lot of personal ethics and life goals, things that I know should not be repeated. And what was important to me when I came here was that freedom, which probably the top one was the Second Amendment freedom, because all the others are, they're there until they're not.
Yeah.
And the only way to save them in the long term might be to act, with force. And so Second Amendment recognizes that we're born with a right to defend ourselves. And so by embracing it, I learned the skills and the tools of doing that. So it was at the top of my importance. And another thing that was very important to me was Jewish identity, which in the Soviet Union we were not allowed to practice religion. We were not allowed to learn about it, know about it, wear symbols of it. And that despite the fact that we were always identified as Jewish, we were just not allowed to be Jewish.
Wow. So, and of course, the Soviet Union is probably the most well-known of the oppressive nations across the globe. But it's interesting to me that I know a lot of people and have met a lot of people who've come from oppressive governments from, different parts of the world, South America, Asia, Soviet Union, parts of Europe. And it's funny, they've never said, hey, it was a horrible experience, but one thing they got right is they made sure that only the government had guns. You never hear that. People from oppressive governments always say, guys, it didn't work. We can't do this. It's always it seems like it's the college kids who, grew up in the suburbs. They're the only ones that really, can find, these oppressive policies, in good favor. I don't know. Is it seem that way? I mean, do people that I imagine you keep in touch with, or at least have part of a community of people that came from the Soviet Union. Do they share your views on the Second Amendment, or are you unique?
For the large part, we absolutely share these views. Maybe we have more in common with Jewish people from the Soviet Union than Jewish people as a whole in this country. We do have a lot of the same ones, and it is very rare and very surprising for me to find people who seem to have not learned lessons from their past. They do exist, but they are a minority, and usually they've allowed themselves to be brainwashed by the new environment they found themselves, and started to completely ignore what they should never ignore. What I find that a lot of members of my community, especially ones that get established, we're no longer just refugees trying to establish ourselves. We get to a certain point, and we do have the strong need and desire to tell people, like the college students you describe, and just the general Americans, anybody who would listen about these experiences. And it's like, wait a minute, we've tried that. It did not work.
Wow.
And let me tell you how badly it did not work. It is very common in my.
So there does seem to be a divide with the Jewish community in general, and with Jews that have come from oppressive governments. There does seem to be a divide when it comes to gun control. Have you ever been lectured by someone who's Jewish and they were born and raised in America, and they explain to you, why you're wrong about oppressive laws? Has that ever happened to you?
Absolutely. There was 2 years of Hebrew school. I got to hear my teacher say stuff that didn't make sense to me. They said a lot of stuff that made sense, but when they talked about certain things, I actually grew up, so I was still learning English. And certain things that I heard from people that I respect and I learned a lot from, and were wonderful people in many ways, but there's certain things that I heard from them, I actually thought that I didn't understand enough English because they possibly could not be saying this.
Wow. Can you remember like an example or something close to an example?
Yeah, an example. I remember this one history teacher was talking against the Second Amendment and civilian gun ownership, and she was using English law as an example. It's like, she said something along the lines of, yes, they still have guns, but it's all registered, and if anything ever happens, they know where to find these guns. And me in my 12-year-old mind, from the Soviet Union, I have this picture of a bunch of soldiers, obviously dressed as Soviet special forces, knocking down doors in these houses in England and asking, "Let me see your gun. Where's your gun? Let me smell it. Let me see if it's been used in a crime just now." So me hearing that was the ridiculous composition I got in my head about what she meant, and for many years I thought that I just didn't understand them.
How do they reconcile? There's no way for you and I to know. We can't dig into their heads, but it just, how do you think they reconcile? Like, how do they sit there across the table from you, and try to explain or argue oppression when you lived it? How do you, do
Yeah.
you have any insight onto that? Like, how can
Uh,
they reconcile that?
yeah. So I'll tell you, and this is going to surprise you. And this is not my communication with just with Jewish people. This is all Americans.
Right.
That uh, I- very honestly, many of them do not believe me. Do not believe people like me when we say that what the outcomes of certain things were. They're like, no, no, you're exaggerating. Like when I say that, for instance, we had one synagogue in the entire large city that I grew up in. I was in Kiev, which is present-day Ukraine. We had one synagogue, and I tell people, my parents, when they were working, they could not attend it. It was theoretically legal, but it would cause a lot of problems. They could lose their jobs, and among other things. And many people don't believe it. They have their own values. They're like, oh, but your education was free, and your medicine was free, and all of this stuff, and you came to a country where education is not free and medicine is not free. And it's like, yeah, we did, and we love it. This is the way to do it. And so when I start describing, what free medicine is and free education is, I think a lot of the people, and this actually doesn't come from a bad thing, not from stubbornness. It comes from goodness. They don't want to see the evil in the regime that they were kind of hoping would not be as evil, or at least not have as bad consequences. It doesn't come from a bad place, I find. But yeah, it is distrust. It's like, nah, you're exaggerating. No way did this happen. Maybe early on during Stalin regime, during gulags, but certainly not after that. It's like, yeah, that's what happened.
Wow, and it is interesting. This part is particularly fascinating. You and I were, when I first started asking you about the Soviet Union, you and I were running a shooting social for Guns N' Moses, and I want to talk about Guns N' Moses a little bit later. I really want to get into that more thoroughly. I think everybody in the U.S. who's over about 40 years old right now is probably fascinated and doesn't really know. It was such an exotic difference. That Russia, every movie, the Soviet Union, they were the enemy, and we didn't really know how everything works, and they were evil, and they wanted to take over the world, and they hated you, and I'm just fascinated. Like, how did it work? I was fascinated talking to you about kind of the day-to-day life of someone who was living in the Soviet Union. That was fascinating to me. And I don't think a lot of people in America really know. In fact, after you and I spoke, I went and talked to some of the smartest people I knew, and it was fascinating. What I was telling them, they had no idea. It was fascinating to hear. And you were pretty young when you left the Soviet Union, right?
Right.
How old were you?
10.
10 years old. So I know there's a lot of things you don't quite remember, or maybe you weren't really a part of, but some of the things that we talked about were really, really fascinating. So I just want to start asking you almost a lightning round of what was it like, living in the Soviet Union. Why don't we start out with, how? Of course, they were communist. It was an oppressive communist regime that ran the Soviet Union, right? By the way, correct me if I'm wrong. If I say something,
So far, so good.
so far so good. Okay.
Yeah.
And you were, you lived there with your family. I don't know, brothers and sisters.
I have a sister, yes.
I have a sister. Okay, and grandparents. I'm assuming.
Yes.
So how did it work? How was it decided in a communist country in the Soviet Union? How was it decided where you lived? How did you get a house?
Yeah, it's a long story, and it's slightly different for some people, but obviously you didn't just go and buy something, and a lot of people, especially new couples, would start off in in communal housing. And best way to describe it is imagine your college dorm, that kind of thing, where it's lots of small rooms, a shared kitchen, a shared bathroom, which might be fine for college students for 4 years. But imagine being a family, and you have all sorts of families in there. And so a little bit before my time, because remember, I was there in the 80s when it was a little bit better in many ways, but somebody my parents' age and older, they experience that kind of thing where multi-generational, 3 generations of people would all live in a room or two, sharing sharing communal living and everything else. And then while you were there, you waited to be granted an apartment wherever they granted to you.
So you just got on this government waiting list, and they said, we'll get you another place to live. For now, you and your family, you're living in. In fact, let's say you're an adult now. You've turned whatever the age of majority was. Was it 18 as well in the Soviet Union? Is that when you were considered an adult at age 18?
I guess so.
Okay. So you're 18 or whatever. At some point, it's time for you to leave the nest. You go on this government list and then just wait. Is there a?
I'm not sure about all the techniques about lists and everything else, but yeah, you wait to be granted. Sometimes you make arrangements. You can exchange stuff. And by the way, this applied only to mere mortals. Children of Communist Party leaders and people who operated by graft and favors, they all had apartments, no problem. You had couples moving out and living in 3-room, 4-room apartments, based on who their mom and dad was. So I was not in that class at all. I didn't know anybody in that class. So, but we did have a nice place because it was eventually given to my grandfather. My grandfather fought in the war. He was wounded. After the war, we're talking Second World War in 1945, they said, we will give apartments to our veterans. And finally in the 70s, he got that promise.
A mere 30 years later.
By the time that he was too weak to walk up 5 flights of stairs.
So in America, if you graduate high school, you can go do whatever you want. You want to go be a homeless bum, you can go be a homeless bum. You want to go to college, there are 100 different ways to go to college. Join the military, community college, work hard. There's a bunch of different ways. Go to a trade school. You can just go get a job at Burger King or wherever. In the Soviet Union, what's your memory or what do you know of? How is it decided what you do for a living?
No, you did decide. I mean, you decided what you want to do. You went to a college that specializes in that realm. If you're accepted, and there's different categories of colleges. Obviously, it's not if you can afford it or not because it was free. However, you still have to be accepted. And there was a whole lot of favoritism there based on, obviously, who your parents are, if they're in the party, what favors they can do for whoever's making the exceptions. They had some restrictions. Hey, we don't want to have too many Jews in our college. So, if you didn't make the cutoff, there was a huge thing that affected a lot of people in my family. But they still ended up going into the spheres they more or less wanted to go into, knowing very well, for instance, that if they wanted to be foreign diplomats, they would never allow a Jewish person or very rarely would they allow a Jewish person into that category. But again, Jews aside, if you get into a college, that is what you're following. Many people, had to move to far away because they would not be accepted into any of the colleges where they live. So would move away, but you would get an education. There were also technical schools you could go into, and all of that was available. And then you would go through automatic placement through the union, and the entire workforce was unionized.
The unions were really, really powerful, right?
Not really. When everything is a union, then it didn't matter. It was still the same. Who who your contacts are, and everybody else ends up where they end up.
But I think you were telling me that a lot is decided through unions. You were telling me, I asked you, well, how do you go? Do people go on vacations or what happened there? And you were saying that, like, if you were a cement mixer, then you would go to the cement mixer union resort
Correct.
on a river somewhere or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Maybe
A
tell
lot
me
of
a little bit more about
factories
that.
had their own areas, and so they would grant it to the permission to the workers. When time comes up, here it is for you and your family to come to this place. If you want to go to a place outside of this, uh, you got to figure it out. If um, it wasn't always available, or it was the kind of money that people just didn't have. But as far as what was very inexpensive or even free, it would be whatever your company or your government organization had access to.
Hmm. Now, how did people? Was it possible to get ahead? Was it possible for someone to be frugal and save their paycheck and buy their way into a better
Yeah.
life in the Soviet Union, or how did that happen?
So money did not have as much play in it. Like I said, it was those connections. What is it called? Gaft? Your ability to exchange favors with others. That was what was really important. The who you know in the party, your ranking in the party. That's how you got things. As far as money, it wasn't the expense of it. It's not like, oh, there's something nice over there, I just can't afford it. It's just not available. I might have all the money in the world, but if I'm going into a store with empty shelves, I cannot purchase anything in that store.
Wow. Now, why do you think why were the shelves empty? Or is that?
I will let economists talk. I mean, you can have a whole, you can do many segments on that.
Well, if I was going into a grocery store, though, I'm living in 1980s Soviet Russia, and I had a couple bucks or whatever. They weren't bucks, but I had some money, and went to go buy food. Would I just go to a grocery store and there'd be food to buy, or how did that work?
Yeah. So at that time, if you're just you're usually not going to buy. You're usually going, if you see a line, you get in it. And in the front of it, there's probably something to buy.
Wow.
And
cheese
that's
or bread or
exactly.
milk. Holy
And usually you just bought it. You might necessarily need it, but if it's available, you buy it and then you have it. You're not planning your menu. You're getting your menu based on what's available. And, this is what my parents did. They're going home from work. They go past something. They see something. They get in line. They buy it. And, we're let me catch my breath.
Sure. Take your time. It's really interesting too, that it's that everything is so like how did people respond? Okay, so let's back up.
You know what? Let me
Sure.
attempt to
Go
answer your question. So this is not a full answer, but imagine a scenario where you don't have an incentive to produce.
Mm-hmm.
You have an incentive to show up. You show up to work. You can work harder and actually produce something, and but there's no promotion. There's no extra. How much would you do in that kind of a scenario? Remember, here in the United States, if a farmer doesn't grow and sell his crops, he doesn't make any money, right? He goes bankrupt. Over there, it didn't matter. Everybody got the same salary, and and yeah, there was an incentive to produce. Otherwise, there might be punishment. But in the long term, when you have an entire economy operating without an incentive, with only you got to do the minimum to show up so they don't completely can you. Economy cannot function like that. And another main important thing. So where there was demand to produce was on the government level. The sciences, the ones making the weapons, the ones on the army side, on the space exploration side, there was a huge incentive over there. Anything that had to be for the government, which was considered, for the people, but really it was for the government. Buildings of government buildings were, first priority. Residential buildings, not a first priority. So the projects that had to that were for that, this is where a lot of the resources went and all the attention went to. As far as consumer goods, things that would make a average person life better, that was not a priority at all. In fact, if you bring this up, on the government level, and I'm just, make an example, but it's like, are people starving? No, they're not starving. We weren't starving. We weren't starving in the 80s or 70s or, for a long time. We had food.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't how we go here and we have the food that we want. We can have a special diet, or, we want to try this, options, all of that. That was not available. Your thing
There
is,
weren't a lot of vegans in Russia. I'm guessing. You had to hey, here, eat what we give you, and
it
that's
is.
that.
I think there were maybe some vegans who didn't intend to be vegans,
Yeah,
just because they couldn't get meat or milk or eggs.
Interesting.
But it's again, starvation was, by the time me and my parents were around, it wasn't people were dropping on the streets from hunger like they were in the first few decades, or obviously after the war for a while as the company rebuilt. It was just, it was a completely different way of doing things. If something broke and you needed to fix it in your house, there's no Home Depot to go and buy tools. And, it's really funny. Everybody I knew who had tools, there were either really old tools from like the 30s or something, imported from the 30s, when you can still import stuff back then from Germany or Czechoslovakia or something like that, or things that were stolen from factories. That's what a lot of people did. Where they worked, they needed some tools, some screws, some things. They would go steal them, and that's how you have them, because there is no Home Depot or anything like that. And if it is ever available, good luck getting it.
Yeah. So, all right. So, oppressive regime, and you were kind of the oppressed of the oppressed, because you were Jewish living in this regime. That sounds like they weren't. Were they not fond of Jews, or were they just not fond of religion, or both?
Definitely both.
Wow.
So
they didn't like religion, but they definitely didn't like the Jewish religion.
Correct. But don't think that the other religions had it much easier on the religious side. Just like I said, you could get in trouble for going to a synagogue just as easily you can get in trouble for going to a church. There was a certain segment of population, they're like, that's fine, you can go to church. The older ladies, people living in the rural areas, it wasn't that much. But if you're an engineer and you're going to church, you could have just as many issues as an engineer going to a synagogue. There were obviously extra things. For instance, going to a church, it's bad because a religion is opium of the masses and all of that. Same thing with going to a synagogue, but they could also accuse you of being a spy for Israel or United States. So there was an additional threat. It was much easier to get you, and they were much more willing to get you in those situations.
And when you say get you, I think that we all kind of have this image. We all being people that grew up in the '80s in America had this image of these people disappearing in the middle of the night and cops coming and black cars and taking people away and that sort of. I mean, was it like that generally, or was that a little
not
bit
by
more?
the '80s? So there was still a lot of threat from KGB, and you were questioned. A lot of the letters were intercepted. But again, the black cars and people disappearing—that's more Stalin era or in the '50s, up to the '50s. Then it was still bad, but it was a little bit more controlled. Mostly because the people who were started to rule it at that time were actually victims of the first of the first few decades, and they didn't want to be as bad. So it wasn't as bad, but it was bad. There was no freedom. When we had family come and visit us and this was already, I think, 1988, Gorbachev, Perestroika, it's supposed to be a lot more freer.
Hmm.
I remember when my family took the relatives to the airport to go back to United States, they were all stopped by KGB and interrogated. Who were these people? Where did you go? What did you do? What did you talk about? And that was already late 80s.
Wow. Okay, so growing up, what was your impression of America and Americans? How was that portrayed to you?
Well, because of my family, I knew not to believe the lies that we were taught in schools and everything else. I knew I had family that had immigrated to the United States
What were
in
the
the
lies?
70s. So the lies are, well, it was the big thing. So, Soviet Union, which oppressed its minorities quite a bit, because they oppressed not just the minorities, but especially the minorities. But they were claiming that United States was a horrible place for minorities. And that was one of the things. But on the bigger scale, they were basically saying that United States is got only a few more years to go. They're in complete decay. So they would show, for instance, a segment of a real thing. A couple of homeless people in New York digging through trash cans. But they wouldn't say that this is, what happens sometimes in large cities. They would say that this is America.
Like, this is how it is.
Yeah.
Everybody's digging through garbage cans.
Yeah, forget California, forget wealth, forget everything else, forget the middle class. This is America.
So were you exposed at all to American media? Like, could you watch American movies and read American books and stories and that sort of thing?
So at one point in the 80s, we got a VCR, a huge thing. And it certainly wasn't from the stores. We got it from abroad, and so we were watching illegally made and copied American movies.
Wow.
And it was great. Now, the Soviet Union did allow many movies to be portrayed, but it had to have a certain theme. So the theme had to be there's wealthy Americans who are abusive, there's poor workers who are abused. And something ridiculous actually there was a great movie that was very popular even still during my time in the Soviet Union was Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
And again, you had the millionaires there portrayed as idiots. You had gangsters with guns. That is the image of America they wanted to portray. And, yes, there was a cute love story there too. And so they allowed it.
Yeah.
And
now, what did you tell me? I asked you what is the most accurate portrayal of the Soviet Union that you remember as far as movies go? And what was your answer? Do you remember?
I don't.
You don't remember? It was with oh no. Hudson.
Yes, Moscow on the Hudson.
Moscow on the Hudson, yes.
Yeah. So that was a great one because do you remember seeing it? So
I went back and watched it.
You did?
So
Excellent.
after you told me that, I actually went back and watched it, and I was fascinated.
So when it came out, many Americans thought it was a bad representation of the Soviet Union. And it couldn't have been better. The most ridiculous thing you remember was our reality. There was, of course, post-COVID, it's not as, the image is not as strong anymore, but them being happy about getting toilet paper.
Yeah, really.
Or just getting in front of the line, in line, I think at one point he gets in the line and he says, "Do you know what they're selling?" And people didn't even know, they weren't sure. And he finally gets to the front of the line and there's shoes. And they don't have it in his size, and he still buys them.
Yeah.
Things like that. So very, very many different things, and maybe you even missed out on some of the nuances because you didn't watch it with me.
We should get together and watch. We should
Absolutely.
bust out some of the best vodka you know of, and we should watch that together because I think that would be really, really interesting. I was fascinated though.
Mm-hmm.
I was more fascinated because you told me how accurate a portrayal it was. So I really, I probably did miss out on some of the nuances, but I was really kind of looking for the nuances. I guess I was looking for the little details. Okay, so in America, if you, as if there, a lot of people are unhappy with the government. We're probably not as oppressive yet as the Soviet Union, but there are groups of people that are unhappy with this and they're unhappy with that, and they show up and they protest or they get involved in elections, something like that. Were there groups of people in the Soviet Union that were unhappy with what was going on? And if so, was anything tried, or could anything have was anything done, or could it have been done?
Well, it was done, and eventually did lead to the collapse of Soviet Union. So again, in the 80s, yes, there were many groups. There were separatist groups that just, because I was born in the Republic of Ukraine, and there was a separatist group that was fighting to separate from the Soviet Union. Other republics had similar things, especially in the Baltics, so there were people. Remember, there were there was no democracy, and yes, there were people. There were elections, but you were just choosing between this communist and that communist, and
so if I'm unhappy with something, whatever it is, I don't like the way something's being run in the town where I live. There's just no real recourse. You
get together with your friends, you buy a bottle of vodka, you drink it all night, and you bitch about the government.
Well, that's actually unfortunately that's what too many Americans do here, and we actually do have the ability.
Yeah, but for them that ability ended over there, and believe me, a lot of that. Alcoholism that was in the Soviet Union was a direct result of people feeling that there's no way out, that they have no recourse, that their life is what their life is, and they were stuck. And some of the most brilliant people, ended up in that state. Some of the most brilliant scientists and authors were huge alcoholics when the party wouldn't allow their them to be published, them to progress, them to share ideas. Because for an intellectual, the biggest thing is they're not money hungry. Their biggest desire is to share ideas and to discuss things and to grow professionally.
Alex, I think that's an amazing point, because when a lot of times when people compare capitalism or the United States with communism or the Soviet Union or any socialist or more communist countries, it's all about economics, and they talk about how greedy people are that want to live in a more of a free market society. But you just said that there are people, there are artists and thinkers, and they can't flourish under an oppressive society. In fact, they go the opposite direction. They wither on the vine when you can't express yourself, when you can't work your art or your thoughts. It just withers and goes away. And I don't think that point is made nearly enough when we talk about the different economic systems.
That's right. There's a concept. I want to interpret it as close to the most correct. So we don't just need bread. We don't just need sustenance. Humans aren't made just to have our basics. What social economists try to do, especially when they compare themselves sometimes to an economy, to a more free market economy where some people flourish and some people fail. They'll say, well, at least here people aren't starving. Well, at least here nobody's homeless. They have a place to go to. Or free medicine, free education. They think that just covering those basics is all a human needs. But we need a lot more than those basics, because even a person in prison has those basics. And when everybody's treated as prisoners, we will take away all your freedoms, but don't worry, we will give you those basics. That is now no way to live, and it's definitely no way to progress, because progress is hey, think of the best idea. We will let you compete. We'll take the best idea, and then we'll go with it. And then maybe somebody else will come in with even a better idea, and they'll win. And then maybe you guys will share the pie, or maybe they need to come back. All of this stuff. And don't just work for the government. How do you think of the consumer sector? How can you make everybody's life better? What product, what service can you offer? This is what we're used to living in the United States. We're not just thinking about, okay, I'm not hungry. I've got a little hovel to go to, and and my college is free. Great. But now what? So, people don't think about it. They think happiness is having those basics covered, and it's not. That's why we move out of our parents' houses. Most of us eventually move out because, why did I move out? I didn't have to pay for rent. I always had great food. I had all my bills paid for by parents, and yet we wanted independence. I wanted to do that all on my own. And, we Americans, we understand that concept of wanting to do things on your own, and it needs to apply not just in, making your own dinner and paying your own rent, but, advancing in your career. What if that wasn't an option? What if that's it? Whatever.
You have to be there. Yeah. You have to live with mom and dad no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, there had to have been, do you have a memory of there had to have been people that supported this system? I mean, even people that weren't benefiting extremely from the system. So I know that there were people at the top who got to live in bigger houses, got to have more stuff, got to have more choices. Like I said, they were part of the Communist Party, so they were taken care of, and they probably had a fairly good life. Mm-hmm. But there had to have been people that weren't really benefiting that much from it, but still supported it. Do you remember those?
Majority of the country was like that.
Why? How could, you know what I mean? Like, why was your
because
view?
They were told that things over there are better. That no matter how bad it is for you, believe me, you don't want to be there. And the propaganda machine, was there their entire life. In school and all that free education they got, that was the message. And unless you were willing, unless you had somebody to open your eyes, and unless you were willing to accept additional information that was not as mainstream, that was your view. It's like, yeah, it might be bad here, but and if it's that bad here in this great country, imagine how much they're suffering over there. And there was endless propaganda. They would put people on TV to say how terrible the United States is, how terrible Europe was. And I am so happy to be in this free country of Soviet Union. This was some communists coming into the Soviet Union and giving an interview. Of course, there was no follow-up because they ended up going back home, or something, because they realized that Soviet Union was not great. They immediately lost freedom. They immediately, got to see that it wasn't a great place.
Wow. So, do you think, and this is probably a question that's above both our pay grades, but it seems like there were tens of millions of people in the Soviet Union, hundreds of millions of people in the Soviet Union that supported this level of regulation. And if you look at the United States, we're 245 years old. We started off with almost no regulation. Now we have pages and pages and pages and pages of regulation on every level. Do you think human beings are able to have the level of freedom that we're talking about, the level of freedom to really truly be able to decide their fate in their life? Do you think we're actually programmed to be able to accept that, or do you think it'll never happen?
So we are programmed, and I'm so sure of it. We are programmed to believe into something religiously. So in the Soviet Union, where they took away all the religion, mm-hmm. their religion became the Communist Party. Mm-hmm. That's why they believed everything exactly as it was or very similar. No matter how bad their life was, they still had this dogma, this complete belief that the Communist Party had their back. They figured things out, and this is the best outcome of all the worlds. And when I see people in this country too, you will see, and not as much on the same level, but you will see that they choose their own dogmas in the same way. I mean, there's some people who are into, for instance, stopping global warming on a religious scale. I mean, they will do violence. They will silence people to convince you of their path. It is no different than religious zealots or communist zealots or whatever else. And yet there's people, like I said, everybody accepts something. So if somebody going to accept something so dogmatically, with such religious zealotry, then hopefully it's something good. I think, accepting freedom with that kind of zealotry, it leads to better things. And accepting, again, I have no problem with a lot of religious people. A lot of Christians have found that perfect balance. A lot of Jews have found that perfect balance. But those that have not sometimes will go into a cult-like, either a cult or something that is cult-like. We're seeing a lot of that right now with vaccinated versus unvaccinated, tribalism and things like that. That is all part of the same problem of people need to follow something with religious fervor. So if we could just use that,
turn that fervor
in on the positive,
yeah.
There's hope. And again, you're right. Somebody at much bigger, at a different pay grade could figure that out, but that's just from my personal experiences how that works.
Alex, I think that was actually really well put. I think and I hope you're right. I really truly do. Well, okay, so your memory of growing up, what did you guys do? What was done in the Soviet Union when you were growing up for fun? I mean, were there sports teams? Did you guys go to restaurants? What did you guys do on the weekend for fun?
Look, I was a kid. I had great parents. Yeah. They made sure I had fun. Obviously, just like any other kid, playing outside with your friends is fun. Sports, if you found the sport you liked, which at that age I didn't, but a lot of people just enjoy soccer. Of course, soccer. Yes. 99% of the
football.
Time, sorry.
They didn't play any football.
Well, it was football, but that's soccer.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Soccer, hockey.
Definitely hockey was big, but you had to wait for winter to play that. Again, outdoors in the
What about restaurants? A lot of did you guys go to restaurants, or how did that work?
Restaurants were horrible. There was no concept of going to a restaurant unless it's a huge occasion, and even then it was really big. I remember we got a restaurant for my grandmother's, I think 60th, and so they ordered a bunch of things on the menu. They show up, half of that stuff is not there. There's no cake, so they had to call in favors so guests have something to eat. And they still had to pay full price. So restaurants for people like us, that was not something that we did. It was not something we certainly considered it as fun. Now for other people, dating, there were discotheques and all of that stuff. So there were plenty of things to do for fun. By the time I was growing up.
Do you remember how it worked, like hunting and fishing? How did that work? Do you remember it all?
Well, yeah, fishing. I've gone fishing, so that was around. But the funny thing is, yes, you can go fishing, but you cannot buy fishing equipment as easily. So a lot of the people you see fishing were with homemade things. So, but there was that hunting where I was. That wasn't even a concept we were aware of.
Wow. In hunting wasn't even a concept that you were aware of.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's just something that I read in stories from the 19th century. When you're reading classics, they went hunting. Us Soviet people, we didn't go hunting, even though obviously there was hunting in the very remote areas, Siberia, and it did exist.
Yeah.
But you can imagine that with hunting requiring firearms and ammo, that was available to very, very few.
Okay, so do you remember how firearms worked in the Soviet
They
Union?
didn't.
It just didn't happen.
It didn't.
There weren't like leftover muskets or anything like that. Nothing like that.
Yeah, a firearm. That's something you saw in war movies, and yeah, you could hear some criminals, having a shootout. But even most criminals didn't have them because they didn't need them. Population was disarmed. It was very easy to get what you need with a knife or just with your fists.
Was there a lot of crime? Do you remember were there bad parts of
So
Russia, and was there a lot of
in the
crime?
80s, there was a lot of crime.
Wow, what
And
kind
this
of
is
crime?
now you could have 10 immigrants over here who grew up at the same time, and they might have different memories.
Understood. Yeah.
Because officially crime did not exist until in the 80s they finally started reporting on it. But officially in the Soviet Union, crime did not exist. In fact, very often they thought that having police is an outdated concept because there's really no crime. The Communist Party represented crime as a product of capitalism.
Wow.
Because of the inequities, some people go into crime. So clearly, you cannot have crime in the Soviet Union. But of course, it did exist, and it existed a lot. So, but I knew people. They would they would be walking. They would see a murdered body.
Goodness. Yeah.
Then that body would be picked up, and they never hear about it again. Maybe there's an investigation, maybe there isn't, but the entire neighborhood knew that somebody got killed in their neighborhood, and that's it. There was no newspaper stories, not anything until like 85, 86, when it got so bad, and that they changed policy and decided to start reporting on it. And that was only because they needed people's help. They actually needed people's help to report crimes, so they had to admit that crime does exist.
So what prevented people from leaving? Well, even what prevented people? Could I just say, "Hey, I have enough money to buy an airplane ticket. I'm going to go spend a couple weeks in Paris." Is that even like what prevented that?
Yeah. So you needed permission to leave, and you were not going to get it.
Just that simple.
I mean, that's the broad rule. Now, obviously, some people did get it. So there was a huge risk of people going. Now, Paris, that was really bad because that was Western Europe. But so they would occasionally allow you to go to Eastern Europe, only as a group, only under supervision. I know both of my parents told me about their trips to the Czech Republic and to Yugoslavia. The stuff behind the Iron Curtain was still forbidden, but I'm sorry, not forbidden, but restricted, but not forbidden. So you would go and see a country very similar to your own, and you were not exposed to the Western world. Now, of course, the ones that did get to travel a lot were actors and performers. And I don't know if you remember, in those days, a lot of them decided to never come back in.
Yeah. Who's the big guy? The
Baryshnikov.
Baryshnikov.
Yeah.
Mikhail Baryshnikov.
Yeah, Mikhail Baryshnikov. Yeah, he.
So do you remember that happening?
No, that was a little bit before my time, but I knew a lot about it. I've read about it, and and since then I've read a lot of stuff that during the Soviet Union wouldn't be printed, but it was always watched very carefully. But after he defected, everybody who had to go anywhere were put through the ringer. Jeez. And if you remember, actually, from the movie Moscow on the Hudson, before they're about to go to Moscow, they're getting lectured by the KGB attaché about what to do, what not to do, where to go.
Yeah, sure. No, I remember. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it was like that. That my parents told me, they had to be told, they had to be watched, and and their experience really depended on how strict their I hate to use the word overseer or their chaperone was.
So you and your family eventually get to, you said you're about, what, 10, 11 years old when you get to
Yeah.
America?
Yeah, so immigration, and that's a total different thing, and especially Jewish immigration. I mean, that's a completely different topic of just normal Soviet citizens going and visiting other countries.
But when my question was going to be, if when you got to the United States, what was the biggest, like, surprise? What just took you completely off guard? Do you remember a couple of things that?
I do. So now, obviously, I wasn't as brainwashed as everybody else because I got to see some movies. I heard different things at home that were maybe being taught in school. So and I felt like I would be okay with everything, and maybe on some things I was, but there were other things that were that did surprise me. When I went to school, we were refugee in the very in a poor neighborhood, and I was one of few white people, and I was so happy about it because they were teaching me in school that white people are bad in the United States and they oppress immigrants and minorities and everything else. So when I saw it was majority minority school, I'm like, great, there's not going to be any violence. I'm not going to be bullied. There's not going to be any fights. Not necessarily my actual experience, but I thought it's like, I very clearly remember being happy that I'm going to this school where that is the reality.
Huh. Where was this?
I was in off of El Cajon in the college area, early 90s. Right by where there was a lot of crime at that time. It's much better now.
Interesting. So, I mean, when you when you go to a store or whatever the first time, I mean, you didn't have to wait in line anymore. You go to a grocery store.
I was prepared for that.
Really?
But let me tell you, so my grandfather was the only one in the family who was allowed to visit the United States. I think it was 88. Mm-hmm. And so the situation in the Soviet Union, scarcity, I mean, it was really bad. Empty store shelves, shortages were so bad that you were actually rationed. You needed ration tickets to purchase a lot of the goods. It wasn't just like you go there and you pay for it. It was rationed, and that's it. So it was a horrible situation. And at that time, he goes to the United States. He visits New York and LA, and I think, and so this is a person that devoted his life, in the Soviet Union. I mean, he wasn't a huge patriot or anything, but he didn't think that his life was so bad. He didn't know just how badly it contrasted with everything. And so the relatives in U.S., I don't remember if it was New York or LA he visited first, but they knew that the first place they need to take him is not museum, it's not Disneyland, it's not even the beach. They took him to the grocery store, a typical supermarket in wherever they were, and they're like, "Huh." And what
was his reaction?
So and 100% believe it because he did not hide his emotions. Yeah. He stood there and wept. Wow. And wept and wept and wept. He cried because no, it wasn't just that. It was the lies. It was all the lies that he was fed. That in the Soviet Union was great. They're the country of victors. They're victorious. United States and the West is dying off. They're rotting. They're living much worse than us. And this was just a regular neighborhood supermarket that dispelled most of those myths.
Wow. So what's it like growing up? I would imagine, I have a lot of pride. When I was a kid, especially, I had an enormous amount of pride in the United States. I think that, it was a part of my identity. And, what was it like growing up in a country where you didn't have that level of pride, where it was more of a, I don't know, maybe you should describe it to me.
Well, I had to fake that level of pride because we were told that we were supposed to be proud. We had to enter, there were specific things in school that you had to be a part of that were kind of like precursor to the Communist Party. I think second grade, you become part of this group. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but there were certain things like you had to go to
Like a social
to
group or
marches.
something?
No, it's
Okay.
not a social. I mean, it's everybody on the school level has to do it. You wear a little pin with Lenin's
Like
face
like
on
a
it.
civics group,
Exactly.
like a rally of some kind or something.
Yeah. So you go to Communist Party, like parades and things like that. You bring flowers to the soldier tomb and things like that. So there's that, and then a couple of years later, you get into the next level where you wear a red tie and a different pin, and you're supposed to be real proud, and you're supposed to write a promise to the Communist Party about upholding communist ideas and keeping it above their words, not mine, keeping the needs of the party above your own.
Yeah. So okay,
Mhm.
as long as I've known you and all the conversations you and I've had, I find you to be a very level-headed, thoughtful person. I don't really, hyperbole is not something I see out of you a lot. You're very,
Thank you.
yeah, no, very level-headed and very accurate and kind of measured. When I look at the way California is going, and when I look at the way even the federal government is going, and not just me, but other people, gee, we're going down this oppressive road, and communists and dictatorships, et cetera, et cetera. And especially with COVID and with gun laws and with the tax code. I mean, you name it. And I'm not just talking the last couple of years. I'm talking the last 10 years. It seems like it's going more and more and more. I mean, they're not repealing laws. They're making more and more regulation every single year. When people compare it to what you know about an oppressive regime, are we exaggerating, or are you worried as well?
I'm incredibly worried because the amount of parallels we're seeing, and I belong to like Facebook and just other groups of other Soviet immigrants, a lot of them older than me with even more experiences and memories. The amount of parallels we're seeing between what we experience and what we're seeing here are huge and growing. In fact, one of the reasons I did start volunteering and getting involved is because it reached that threshold where it was just too scary. And so it wasn't an accident that in '09 is when I started really volunteering on both on the Second Amendment side and Jewish side, and other things that are important to me and all of us, is because the parallels were just too obvious and too frequent. One of the things that happened in '09 was all of a sudden, after years of criticism of Bush, which was, that's democracy. It is what it is. We all had fun with it. All of a sudden, it was not okay to criticize a president. You'd be called a racist. You'd be called stupid. I couldn't even say stuff that, from my personal experience, like, oh, hey, by the way, in the Soviet Union, we've seen something similar. Oh, no, you're just saying that. So it was very scary when government came out. I don't know if you remember this to me. I was trying to, tell everybody I could speak to about this when they created a website where you can report false information about the Affordable Care Act. And I said, "Are you kidding me?" I mean, obviously, it didn't follow with government officials coming to your house and saying, "Hey, stop it." But that is step one to leading to something like that. And I was just saying, how is this okay with people? How are people not incredibly terrified by government doing this and controlling people's criticism of it in the democracy? That was a huge red flag, pun intended, and followed by a lot of other smaller things and smaller behaviors that I was seeing. Like when did it become okay for other people, and usually it was like college age people, to end a disagreement with, "I'm going to report you." Like, are you kidding? Report me to whom? And this is before Facebook. They wasn't reporting you to Facebook. They were threatening to report you to the government. Now I don't know what they meant by it, what their understanding of reporting you was. But like, are you kidding me? That was the Soviet Union. They opened the archives, KGB archives, and they found like 2.5 million reports of people. And I've read some of them.
Now, is there anybody that you left behind that you still, or that you keep in contact with, or that you reconnected with? Is there anybody from your childhood that stayed and you now?
So so my parents have some friends in Ukraine, but as far as family, whoever didn't immigrate, either at the same time, a little bit before, a little bit after us, has since passed. So I actually don't have any close family left over there. But no, we do still have some friends we keep in touch with.
What are their views of the United States, or do you ever talk about that with them?
It was interesting. So I went to Ukraine in '06, and this was right after the Orange Revolution, and there was a lot of optimism in Ukraine. And I remember some people our age, like maybe a little bit older, than me, they were filled with so much optimism that when somebody said, "Hey, maybe you can go to United States with Alex," like, are you kidding? Go there from here?
Wow, what did they mean? They just felt
it was optimism. They're like,
okay.
it's just going to get so much better because democracy won. And look, they had every right to be optimistic because it was actually going in the right direction at that time. They were embracing a little bit more Western ideals and democracy. It just didn't go very well in the long term. And so now all of them are like, "Hey, how do I get a work visa to United States?" All that optimism is gone, and which is unfortunate because they deserved so much better. They get rid of Soviet Union, they get their independence, they did a lot of things correctly, and I just wish them well. I don't have any negative thoughts. I don't want anybody there to fail, not Russia, not Ukraine, not any of the previous republics. Belarus, though, that's been in a dictatorship just almost as bad as the Soviet one ever since the breakup. I wish them all well. It's just they just haven't done that well, and they're actually making it worse because the brief freedom they got, where it was where a lot of it was taken over by organized crime and just the worst individuals out there. They look at that era that happened in the 90s with a lot of crime and just a lot of really bad people become filthy rich off of what was left over. They look at that and they're like, "Oh, we already tried American-style capitalism. It doesn't work." It's like, is that what you think you had?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
But, nobody's asking me. So that is a view that I've heard many times.
Okay, so you took your Jewish background and your Soviet Union background and your love of the Second Amendment and your passion for helping all your communities, and you now lead Guns and Moses. Tell folks, what exactly is Guns and Moses?
So Guns and Moses is a Jewish shooting club. Although club, different people view it differently. So it kind of started. I didn't start it. I inherited it in 2018. But it got started by a gentleman who was an observant Jew and who was very much into the Second Amendment and armed self-defense, and he knew other observant Jews who felt the same way and wanted to, wanted to keep growing that community and also to keep reminding everybody that, hey, we need to keep practicing. So he put this together with other observant Jews to say, hey, let's observe both Judaism and armed self-defense and keep doing this. So when it started first with a prayer session and with always lectures and education. It's like, they were already armed individuals, they were trained, and so they always wanted to get to that next level. And that's kind of what they wanted to do, to have people to come in, either talk about the Jewish side of armed self-defense, and also just more training and that. So it was a small group, and then they started adding more people. They wanted to grow the club, and so I was kind of that second wave of people joining it. I don't even remember how they found me.
Yeah, well, so you guys do a lot of things: train together, meet and train,
Yeah.
all the way from basic to
Well,
intermediate.
that's now. I'm kind of going to how it started. So that's how it started. And unfortunately, the person who started it had to move to another state and got taken over by another enthusiast. And eventually he had to go be a dad yet again. And so he said, "Alex, can you take it over?" And I never wanted to run anything. I was always very happy to volunteer, be somebody's number two, be the guy who say, "Hey, Mike, what do you want me to do? I'll do it." I just don't want to be making that decision. And so I did those kind of roles in different, areas of volunteering for over a decade. And by the time it came my turn, and he said, "Look, Alex, you're the only one who can really take it over." And I said, "I guess I am." So at that point, I took it over, and I tried to maintain that education and we started growing a little bit. And as we started growing, and again, remember, I'm reaching out to people who already shoot, who already have firearms, just to train more often and to be better representatives of armed Jews in the community. But people are saying like, "Hey, I know these people, they've never shot. Can they come here and learn?" So sure. So you'd have one or two people come in, and then we would teach them, give them safety, and then they would go on the lane and shoot with one of our guys, and or me, and we started growing that way with a lot of new people, and all of a sudden demand grew.
Why did demand grow? What would you chalk that up to? Because I watched demand grow as well, and we're happy to help. But what got people interested all of a sudden about a year and a half ago?
Yeah. So strangely, the biggest growth came after the COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
Because you'd think it would be the Poway synagogue shooting, or Pittsburgh, or just the general rise of anti-Semitism across, and some of it was, but it was really it was really the lockdown and the violence that followed, and I think it really, and I don't have a clear answer, but one of the reasons I'm thinking is it took people started thinking about it less as armed and more as self-defense, because a lot of the violence that happened during COVID was not done with firearms. It was just masses, or just somebody walking on the street, seeing somebody that looks like a Jew, and they would attack him. There were a lot of that on the East Coast. So guns were no longer the problem, but a possible solution. And when they started reaching out and looking at it, eventually they found us here, in San Diego. And I was also getting a lot of calls from other cities, and a lot of messages on Facebook, just about doing this. So this is not just the San Diego growth and demand; it happened nationwide.
That's amazing. If people want to get a hold of Guns and Moses, or they want to join, or how can people get involved, and what do you recommend they do to reach out to you?
So everybody can email me, gunsandmosessd@gmail.com. That's guns, letter N, Moses, SD for San Diego, at Gmail. And so I usually start with that. That's because one of the things I tell people, I don't want to be just the guy that puts together these classes, brings in, arranges instructors, or with you, what we arrange mentors. Because a lot of people are okay training on their own, or they're not in San Diego, or they cannot work around my schedule. I want to be a resource. I'm okay getting that email. It's like, what do you recommend here? Even if it's not somebody that generally trains with us, or that I've seen, just as long as I see they're doing the right things for the right reasons.
And I've been looking forward to interviewing you on this subject for a while, and I'm glad we finally did it. And I found it fascinating. I really, truly thought it was fascinating. Your memories and what you know of the Soviet Union and why you got involved and are doing what you're doing. What do you hope sticks out in people's head when they hear this, when they sit down and listen to this interview and they listen to you describe everything that you've described? What do you hope what message do you hope they walk away with?
So
I know that's a big question.
it is, and I wish you prepared me for this question because this question alone could be an hour. I don't want to look. My experiences are my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I hope people learn from them, but at a certain point, unfortunately, in my experience, I find that they have to have some of their own experiences. So, for instance, why are so many people joining the club now, even though they may have heard of it like 2-3 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they now embracing armed self-defense? Probably because something happened to them, or whatever is happening. They can no longer justify it as a one-time deal, or this will go away if this, because everybody wants to be hopeful. They're like, or blame just one section or the other. If we just have this president here or not here, whichever the case is, things are going to get better. And so these cycles went through, and eventually some people just run out of excuses, and and this is when they embrace change, because they already know what it is. Everybody has seen what I have seen. They just made different conclusions. It scared me that I was told that I couldn't criticize the government. Other people might have been happy that people like me couldn't criticize the government because they were very happy with the current government. But enough cycles change, enough of this attitude, and people will come to the same conclusions. And I know it's going to be the same conclusions because these are the basics of humanity. Self-defense is a basic, survival instinct is at the very core of our existence. And the United States has just been so great to so many of us for so long that we started to ignore that that part of ourselves. We just didn't need to exercise it. Right. This is why so many people, when I started, were saying, what? Look at you. You're a big guy. You live in a great neighborhood, and what? You need a gun? Are you paranoid? Who are these bad people? Are they in the room right now? Treating me like there's something wrong. Like planning for the future is something that's wrong to do. That that it makes me some kind of a warmonger, or I want to go do something evil or expect something evil. No, it's just a normal thing. It's if you rationally think about it, okay, if something happens, it is better to be prepared. And what is the ultimate of preparedness? One of the examples I've used to somebody recently, it's if I have non-perishable food and I'm storing it, not knowing if I have to be in for the winter for a month or two, how many months do I prepare for? And they're like, I don't know. I said, well, how much space do I have on my shelf? I'll fill it up. It's non-perishable,
Right.
That's it. So it's the same thing, how much do I need to prepare? Within reason, obviously. I know I'm not training, not me, not anybody else. We're not going to go into combat in Fallujah, so it realistically looking at our scenarios, but imagining that it could get much worse. To what level should we train? As much as we can. No, none of us are quitting jobs or not taking care of our families or not going to synagogue or doing all that. But when you do have that allotment of time for self-defense, do it, and it's got to be all-inclusive. Yes, it's got to be awareness. It's got to be avoidance of problems. It's got to be physical self-defense, and it's got to be armed self-defense.
And that's exactly what you guys do fantastically well. I appreciate everything you do, Alex. Congratulations again on your award at Gun Prom. And I look forward to working with you to defend and preserve and restore our Second Amendment rights for years to come. And I thank you sincerely for everything that you do.
Well, I have to return the thank you to you and to all of the mentors, as you know, and I've written about it recently. I hope everybody reads that particular thank you as well. That my club, the way it is, the reason we were able to grow is because of the San Diego County Gun Owners and the mentors that come out and give us their time and their experience. Because when all of this flood opened and I had hundreds of people all of a sudden deciding that they wanted to train, I did not have enough mentors. I could not get ammo. I could not get range time at that time. And yet this was an opportunity for everybody finally saying, okay, I realize it. Now is the time for me to do it. Yep. So, and the only reason we've been able to do it is because of your members and because of those mentorship availability.
It's a great relationship. I look forward to continuing it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it, Alex.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks for watching our Magnum show, where we dig into gun owners topics a little more in depth. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.